Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Mystic Pillars YouTube channel. In Eastern spiritual culture, the moon is perhaps the most familiar image to every individual. Every human being, from birth, has known the moon through the lullabies of their mothers and through fairy tales. Since ancient times, the moon has been present in human life. People relied on the moon's cycle around the earth to create their own calendar, the lunar calendar. Full moon days are often important days in a month, according to the beliefs of Asian people. You're likely familiar with poems featuring the moon from your school days, though seemingly just a symbol of romantic imagery, often appearing in poetry. Few realize that the moon is also linked to many inexplicable mysterious stories. In Western culture and beyond, strange structures on the moon have appeared countless times in famous media publications. However, those pieces of information suddenly vanish from mass media, and the photographic evidence is cut from articles. There have been strange videos of moon waves surfacing in recent years. If you've watched these videos, I'm sure you feel the same way we do. There's a sense that the moon resembles a virtual projection rather than a genuinely existing entity. With just one click on YouTube, you can find numerous videos of strange lights or unidentified flying objects, UFOs landing on, taking off from the moon, but to this day, they remain unidentified flying objects. Can science explain these strange phenomena? Why is clear evidence ignored, or even ruthlessly dismissed? Does the gentle light we see in the sky every night conceal countless other horrible secrets? Is the moon really an artificial satellite? Scientific studies suggest that the moon formed as a result of a collision is the giant impact hypothesis. To put it simply, imagine a collision caused by a colossal object the size of Mars, impacting Earth about 4.6 billion years ago. After the Sun and the solar system were born, a cloud of vaporized matter was ejected and entered orbit around the Earth. The cloud cooled and condensed into a small, solid ring, which then accreted to form the moon. It seems, according to what scientists announce, that the moon is no different from other planets in the solar system formed by collisions. But if you follow research related to the moon, you'll be truly surprised. Documents about the satellite named the moon have not only been of interest in modern times. Since antiquity, references have appeared. Its perfect symmetry and the accounts of astronauts seem to lead to a logical conclusion that the moon actually has a hollow structure and is merely an artificial satellite, intentionally placed in Earth's orbit. There's a hypothesis that several thousand years ago, shortly after human life formed, ingenious engineers completed this project with the intention of changing Earth's biological rhythm and simultaneously controlling the activities of its inhabitants. Are these just baseless rumors? The moon seems like a natural feature, just like any other on our planet. But if we truly take the time to observe this entity closely, we will surely see what NASA researcher Robin Brett saw. He once said that it would be easier to explain the non-existence of the moon than to explain its existence. Why is that? Even the scientific community can't explain why the moon is older than the Earth we live on, existing even millions of years longer than Earth. If the moon had a proportional relationship to the planet it orbits, like other planets, its width would only be about 30 miles. But the truth is, it's not just double or triple, 72 times larger than the predicted width. The moon's width is about 2,160 miles, and no planet, satellite in this universe is 1/4 the size of the planet it orbits. Furthermore, the craters on the moon are also something scientists are always curious about. The varying diameters of the craters suggest impacts of different sizes and forces. The difference in crater diameters should logically lead to a difference in depth, but strangely, the moon's holes all have a similar depth. Then, when astronauts attempted to drill into the moon's craters, they were hardly able to penetrate its surface. They also discovered processed metals, such as brass, mica, and pure titanium. These elements are not naturally occurring. They are created for architectural designs. However, the strange thing is that when you examine the geometric and mathematical relationship between the Sun, Moon, and Earth, you'll find them to be incredibly precise, defying all random probability. And we haven't found a similar relationship anywhere else in the universe. The moon is the perfect size to cover the Earth and the Sun during a solar eclipse, because the moon is 400 times smaller than the Sun, but is exactly this number of times closer to the Earth. The Sun is 109 times the diameter of the Earth, and the Earth's diameter is nearly 4 times that of the moon. This means that in terms of volume, nearly 50 moons could fit inside the Earth, and over 1 million Earths could fit inside the Sun. But all that is just the beginning. There are coincidences surrounding the number 366. The Earth orbits the Sun 366 times per year, while the Moon orbits the Earth 366 times in 10,000 days. One of the stranger things about the Moon that we probably never think about is tidal locking. Frankly, the scientific definition makes it sound very natural. Tidal locking is simply understood as the Moon's rotation precisely matching its orbit. In short, this means that, contrary to all natural laws, one face of the Moon is always turned towards the Earth. We never get to see its far side. So, even though it's not dark, it's often known as the dark side of the Moon. That's the part we can never observe from the surface of the Earth. The universe may hold countless unsolved mysteries, but one thing is certain: almost everything in the solar system rotates, including the Earth. Our planet's rotation has thrown the Moon into a fierce retrograde orbit, and perhaps this is what makes the Moon look like an eye observing the Earth from above. And this eye seems to never stop its bound surveillance. All astronomers know that there is a 10-12, 1 trillion chance for the Moon of any planet to appear the same size as the Sun. This phenomenon is what we commonly call a solar eclipse. If you observe a total solar eclipse from space, you will see this image. What do you see when you look at it? Doesn't it look like a human eye? There is a fact that natural planets or satellites orbit their planets along the equator. So, why does the Moon orbit our Earth at a 5 incline? The Moon's precise distance, altitude, and elliptical path allow it to regulate life activities on Earth. How? By creating tides and seasons. Do all these things benefit the Earth? According to the laws of physics, the Moon's position shouldn't be what it is. Do you know what the Earth would be like without the Moon? Or do we just know it as a soft light rising from the horizon every night? If the Moon truly didn't exist, Earth's orbit would also change, and our planet would then have unstable gravity. The Earth would wobble and spin without any pattern. The Moon is nothing short of a random anomaly that is lucky for humanity. Why is that? The reason is that tides on Earth are primarily caused by the Moon and partly by the Sun. So, how are tides created? The Moon's gravity spreads across Earth's oceans. When high tide is at its peak, the Moon aligns with the Earth rotating beneath. High tide occurs on the opposite side of the planet, because gravity pulls the Earth more toward the Moon than it pulls the water. On the full moon and new moon days, the Sun, Earth, and Moon are aligned, creating higher than normal tides. When the Moon is in the first or last quarter, the tides are smaller than when they form. The Moon's 29.5-day orbit around the Earth is not circular. When the Moon is closest to Earth, the spring tides are even higher, and they are called perigine spring tides. All this strong pulling has an interesting effect. Our planet slows down by about 1.5 milliseconds per century. All these effects were considered normal and natural until the hypothesis arose that the Moon is an artificial satellite created by aliens. It sounds absurd, but what if the Moon was placed where it is? To answer this question, we first need to understand our own history, and the ancients might have already prepared the answer for us. Although we may not have learned about this in books or lectures, but there are countless documents in different cultures that mention the so-called pre-moon time. Hasn't the Moon always existed in the sky? The list of people who wrote about this must first mention famous ancient Greek philosophers and historians, including Aristotle. There are even historical documents mentioning a period when the Moon did not exist. How strange. It wasn't hidden by clouds or bad weather phenomena. It simply didn't exist. According to the claims of some ancient scholars, the myth of the Great Flood that destroyed the world is mentioned in legends and oral traditions. Proselenes is the term used to refer to people who lived before the moon. Colombian legends tell that in the most distant past of this continent, people existed when the moon had not yet appeared in the sky. When describing the history of the Arcadia region, Plutarch wrote that the Pelasgian predecessors of the ancient Greeks lived in this area from a very ancient time, at a time when the moon did not exist. Apollonius Rhodius in Argonautica mentioned the same thing. He spoke of a time when not all celestial bodies existed in the sky, and the moon was one of them. At that time, only the Pelasgians lived on the mountains of Arcadia in Greece. The inhabitants of Arcadia, also called Proselenes, which means those before the moon in Greek. Evidence has also been found in other parts of the world. In Bolivia, symbols on the wall of the Calasasaya courtyard, built in 13,000 BCE, provided evidence that the moon entered Earth's orbit at a specific time long ago. The indigenous people living in the Bogotá Plains, east of the Colombian Cordilleras, also have many oral stories mentioning the pre-moon time, or, according to the legend of the Zulua tribe living in Africa, the moon is hollow, and is the residence of the Kita race. The legend says that the moon was brought here hundreds of generations ago by the two brothers Wawan and Mpanku to steal the moon in the form of an egg from the great fire dragon and place it into Earth's orbit. After consuming the yolk of the hollow egg, only the hollow shell of the moon remained. They then rolled the moon across the sky down to Earth, causing great floods on the planet, ending the golden age of the past. Could these seemingly absurd legends coincide with human understanding of successful history? That when the planet's population reaches a certain limit, the Earth is reset with a great flood. At that time, all the races living on this planet became one group of people whom scientists today call mitochondrial Eve, about 150,000 to 200,000 years ago. Ancient Earth may have undergone such terrifying great floods. Could the reason for this be that the Earth did not have the moon orbiting it back then? Could this explain why so many cultures that have no connection to each other all mention our friends from outside the universe? The stories about the time without the moon documented in ancient texts seem too unreasonable because, according to calculations, the moon is even older than the Earth. So, did scientists make a calculation error? Or is what we know simply not the truth? The idea that the moon was brought here and is not a natural satellite has existed for a very long time. We just don't understand how that could happen. But just imagine, what if the impossible were completely true? What if the moon, which we consider a natural object, was actually brought here by mysterious races using some method? Would the moon's role be merely to regulate life on Earth, creating tides and seasons? How is that related to the humanoid races outside Earth? Could the answer be found in ancient historical works, like the Sumerian clay tablets, those who created an ancient civilization that even modern people fear, which showed the appearance of aliens? According to them, it was a superior species that genetically modified humans to turn us into slaves, serving them right here on this planet. According to David Icke, the first sign to pay attention to is the moon's mass. Most celestial bodies have their mass concentrated in the central core, but the moon's mass, according to calculations, is entirely concentrated outside the crust. This means that its inner core is completely hollow. We know that the moon's diameter is about 1/4 of Earth's diameter. But how is its mass so small, if compared on a scale? The moon's mass is only 1/200th the mass of the planet we live on. The difference should not be that large. This has perplexed scientists for a long time. Furthermore, the physical and chemical composition discovered on the moon's surface also reinforces the hypothesis that this is an artificial structure. The abnormally thick lunar surface is something scientists have debated for decades. According to conspiracy theorists, scientists cannot explain why elements not found in nature appear on the moon. Lunar rocks contain a large amount of metals that are not known to occur naturally without human intervention. High-quality titanium, which is used to build space satellites and submarines, was found in large quantities on the Moon. Analysis of samples collected from the Moon also revealed the presence of high-concentration uranium, including a small amount of radioactive material used for large-scale plutonium production. After many years of research, in 1970, two Russian scientists, Vasily Vasin and Alexander Sherbakov, published an article in Sputnik magazine titled, "Is the Moon the Ultimate Product of Extraterrestrial Intelligence?" Accordingly, the article hypothesized that the Moon is an artificial Earth satellite. It was placed into Earth's orbit by incredibly intelligent beings we know nothing about. Based on absolute logic, its size, and perfect rotation direction, as if pre-calculated, the two scientists believed that the Moon had been placed in Earth's orbit a long time ago. This is no different from the plot details in the science fiction movies we've watched. But the two Russian scientists were not alone. This seemingly irrational idea was agreed upon by many. In 2006, after years of diligent exploration and discovery, two Englishmen, Christopher Knight and Alan Butler, published their research in a book titled Who Built the Moon? They pointed out that the perfect geometric ratio and the sequence of integers for every aspect of the Moon are unique, making it an unreplicable object in our solar system. In the book, they also raised the issue of the extremely light mass, which is too disparate compared to the Moon's size. From there, the two scientists concluded that if perfect life only developed on Earth, because the Moon is exactly what it is and where it is, then the notion we hold that the Moon is a natural object is completely irrational. They say the higher probabilities are that the Moon was placed in our orbit, and that it is a hollow planet. Clearly, there are things that even scientific evidence is not enough to fully explain. In November 1969, the Apollo 12 crew sent their lunar module crashing down onto the Moon, creating an artificial earthquake within a 40-mile radius. The super-sensitive equipment meticulously recorded the crash. It helped humans discover that the Moon rang like a bell for nearly 40 minutes, and it took about 9 minutes for the vibrations to reach their peak. The Moon was like a hydraulic shock-absorbing structure. This discovery was so extraordinary that NASA was ready for the next test. This time, they wanted to use a heavier rocket and a module equivalent to 11 tons of explosives. The Apollo 13 rocket stage performed its mission. NASA researchers placed the seismometer more than 100 miles from the crash site. But this time, the Moon rang like a gong and reverberated for 3 hours. Geologists say the Earth only reacts to vibrations for a few minutes, even during very large earthquakes. Therefore, the results of both tests were beyond humanity's imagination at the time. Many people began to doubt their own long-held perceptions about the Moon. According to scientists, the Moon is like a space structure specially designed to withstand collisions with asteroids and comets. Such a design is so stable that no meteor collision could shatter the Moon into pieces. When you consider the Moon's perfect shape and its location, along with the shallow craters, the reverberating sounds, and the tidal lock, you understand that there is more to the Moon than we currently comprehend. Beneath the lunar surface, perhaps far more horrible mysteries are hidden than we imagine. Images taken by astronauts on November 23, 1966, indicated that there were more than 6 tower-like structures on the Moon. These images were published in famous American newspapers like the Washington Post and the LA Times with a scientist's statement that they were too perfect to be natural. Through the research process, Soviet space engineer Alexander Sherbakov stated that these towers were arranged exactly like the tops of the ancient Egyptian pyramids and cast shadows with 4 perfect 90 angles into the area of the shallow craters. And do you remember? Not a few people believe that the gigantic pyramids are the product of superior extraterrestrial intelligence. Is there a coincidence here? And if it's not a coincidence, how are the pyramids and the Moon all connected? At NASA, Dr. J. Green also asserted that they cannot be natural objects. They are taller than any building on the planet we live on. But all related data seems to have been broken off. NASA refused to investigate further and claimed it was just a trick of light and shadow. Consequently, topics related to the Moon were quickly removed from the media, but the research work was not forgotten. Years later, some photos from Apollo 17 showed these distinct right-angled structures again. You may notice that photos of the moon are not clear. Even modern ones look like they were taken in 1912. In fact, it seems that photos taken from distant Mars are much clearer than photos of the moon. At least until 1994, photographer John Lear colored photos of the moon taken from an orbit 100 miles away. The color effect made the anomalous structures appear more clearly than when viewed in black and white. If the structures on the moon are real, not illusions created by light and shadow, then who created them? Before the first moon landing, the Apollo 10 spacecraft flew around the far side of the moon's side that cannot be observed from Earth's surface, and their recordings astonished scientists once again. Apollo 10 allowed us to hear strange sounds never heard before in outer space. The sounds were likened to the electromagnetic radio sounds recorded by devices inside the rings of Saturn. You can imagine it's quite similar to the sound you hear when an airplane takes off and lands. NASA attributed the noise to radio waves interacting with the moon's magnetic field, but the moon does not have a magnetic field like other planets. So what created these noises? The moon is Earth's only natural satellite and the fifth largest natural satellite in the solar system. Although stories about the moon have existed for a long time in ancient texts and oral legends, it remains just a pale blue light in the night sky in human eyes. Only when human science and technology made breakthroughs could people gradually peel back the layers of truth about this satellite. From the late 1950s, humans began the journey to discover the moon's secrets. In the early 1960s, the U.S. National Aeronautics and Space Administration (NASA) began pursuing the goal of safely sending a person to the moon and bringing that astronaut back to Earth peacefully. At that time, the goal set by NASA was something the American public and the whole world had never contemplated. The journey to explore the moon consumed a lot of intellect, sweat, tears, and even the blood of astronauts. Despite failed tests that cost astronauts their lives, NASA continued its efforts. On July 16, 1969, the Apollo 11 spacecraft with 3 astronauts, Neil Armstrong, Michael Collins, and Buzz Aldrin, flew into lunar orbit. Finally, on July 20, 1969, the world's first crewed flight successfully landed on the moon's surface. Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin became the first astronauts to set foot on the moon. Humanity's desire to conquer the moon became a reality. The successful Apollo 11 landing immediately attracted the attention of the whole world. About 600 million people watched the event on television. It was the most watched television program in human history. That alone proves that humans always want to explore the mysteries of this universe. Immediately upon stepping out of the spacecraft onto the moon, Neil Armstrong said, "That's one small step for a man, one giant leap for mankind." In this landing, the 2 astronauts, Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin, successfully planted the American flag on the moon. They also collected samples of soil and the mineral armalcolite. In some later studies, American scientists discovered that the proportion of oxidized copper on the moon was exactly the same as on Earth, and the mineral armalcolite is also found in many places on Earth, just as Armstrong said. This event was indeed a giant leap for mankind. The first Apollo spacecraft to land on the moon was one of humanity's most victorious events in the quest to discover the mysteries of the universe. The era of human conquest of space officially began. But when strange structures were discovered, NASA began preparing the astronauts out of fear that they would encounter something mysterious or someone, a non-human living object. During that trip, there were 2 minutes where both the video and the radio went silent. Is it possible that both the camera and the radio stopped working at the exact same time? Of course not, because those were the most advanced devices humans possessed at the time. They created reliable recordings. Years after humans set foot on the moon, many people close to Armstrong said that something truly happened during those 2 brief minutes. When leaving the module, Armstrong intentionally switched his communication line to the emergency line and said, "Sir, there are other spacecraft here. They're lined up on the other side of the crater. Those ships are really big and they're watching us." Without fully disclosing the confidential information, no one can answer the question of why the astronauts returned to Earth with such a strange mood. There is none of the excitement or eagerness that should have been present in people who had flown out of Earth for the first time and touched the surface of the moon. Clearly, something was wrong. When the astronauts were interviewed privately, you wouldn't find it difficult to spot the expressions on their faces. Even if you weren't a body language expert, something was truly amiss. Neil Armstrong said, "It really is the beginning of a new era," with a noticeable hesitation. Perhaps one of the most intriguing points for humanity to this day is Armstrong's speech given 25 years after he set foot on the moon. According to him, there are great ideas undiscovered. Breakthroughs are the reward for those who are capable of peeling back one of the layers of truth. There are places beyond human belief. Wait a moment. What is the protective layer of truth that Armstrong mentioned? What or who is preventing us from reaching the truth? If the moon is not a solid mass, like almost all other planets in the solar system, but a hollow artificial satellite with special structures, then another life form just exists somewhere in this universe, different from Earth's. And of course, no one is sure about this. Only the astronauts, those who had the opportunity to get close to the moon, could approach the truth. And it's no surprise that they mention these truths from the very beginning. The interesting thing is, why do they tend to hide what they know from the public for so many years? Only a few are willing to disclose much of what they know. Scott Carpenter, an astronaut on the Mercury Atlas 7 spacecraft, said, "At no time are astronauts really alone in space. There is always the surveillance of UFOs around them." In addition, after many years of making a legendary moon landing, Buzz Aldrin lived in seclusion and only made a few statements. There is a monolith on Mars' moon. When we discovered it, we wondered who put it there. The first Japanese American to enter space, Ellison Onizuka, admitted that he had seen strange little creatures that looked like humans, but they were certainly not of Earth origin. Then, the sixth astronaut to set foot on the moon, Edgar Mitchell, said, "Yes, the visitation of extraterrestrial beings is completely real, and they will continue." In the 1950s, physicist Enrico Fermi pointed out strange contradictions about life on other planets. According to him, given the vastness of the universe, the probability of another civilization existing is very high. Those civilizations might even have superior intelligence to ours. However, he also said that there is very little evidence to prove this hypothesis, either on Earth or in space. Considering all the information shared from the beginning of this video, do you believe Enrico's statement? Is there really no authentic evidence that the moon is an artificial satellite? Or is all the evidence being covered up and not allowed to be publicly disclosed? In fact, is everything we know the truth? What made the people who actually saw the truth afraid to share that information publicly? David Icke made a very wise statement about the true nature of humans. When new information challenges deep-seated beliefs in human consciousness, it activates our primitive brain. Rage will also arise from that. All this seems to imply that we, the creatures called the most intelligent on the planet, are actually slaves to another superior species. And if this is true, it is difficult to accept. If the moon is indeed a satellite that was placed in space and is not a natural object, then surely one day, scientists will find out. Because humans will always explore the mysteries of the universe with their abilities. Science and technology are tools that help humans explore the universe here, constantly developing every hour, every minute. Of course, important information like the existence of life outside Earth will never be disclosed to the public. Why? Because they will cause unprecedented chaos in life, or even the collapse of society. Armstrong's statement, "A small step on the moon, a giant leap for mankind," should perhaps be replaced with, "A small step on the moon, a giant deception for mankind," to seem more reasonable. What does all this mean? The ancient memory of an inhabited Earth without the moon has been passed down from generation to generation, forming strange legends in civilization. So how did the moon get there? Was it formed naturally or created by a lost civilization? In one of the most incredible scenes in cinematic history, in the 1999 science fiction movie The Matrix, where the main character Neo has to choose between a blue pill, symbolizing ignorance, or a red pill, symbolizing the discovery of a terrifying truth. And of course, like normal people driven by curiosity, he chose the red pill. When he took it, Neo was thrown into a terrifying new reality. His consciousness was actually imprisoned in human form, and a more advanced, more malicious race was controlling and running life on Earth. The movie, after its release, attracted widespread public attention, and its immense popularity fueled discussions everywhere, from churches, clubs, and schools about whether the Earth is truly being controlled. Is the truth about the Earth we live on darker than what we know? As we continue our journey to explore the mysteries of the moon and its history, the truth seems to be peeled back layer by layer. Will you choose the red pill to discover the whole truth, even if it is incredibly terrifying, or the blue pill to continue your current peaceful life? David Icke once said, "The best kind of control is the kind that you cannot see. It is a prison without bars, the perfect structure, light mass, artificial architectural materials found, along with the structures on the moon, may be enough to surprise us about this satellite, which we thought was completely natural." However, things don't stop there. It's certainly no coincidence that many researchers simultaneously mention the current issue of the moon. Is there a force silently monitoring human life? If the moon is not a natural satellite, why was it placed there? Is the moon an invisible bar that someone created for the Earth? Let's turn back time a bit, to the past, to understand the legends associated with the moon. It's not a sudden occurrence that the moon, with its gentle light, is associated with strange and somewhat frightening stories. In contrast to the images of Lady Hing and Kui in Asian countries, the moon in Western countries is often associated with the image of the werewolf. On full moon nights, normal people transform into disgusting, hairy animals with human bodies and wolf heads. Therefore, in the 16th century, the moon was something that evoked bizarre and eccentric human behavior. The lunar effect is an unproven correlation between specific phases of the moon cycle, about 29.5 days, and the behavior and physiological changes in living organisms on Earth, including humans. In some cases, the purported effect may depend on external signs, such as the amount of moonlight. In other cases, such as the approximately monthly human menstrual cycle, the coincidence in timing reflects no influence from the moon. A significant number of studies have examined the influence on humans. By the late 1980s, at least 40 studies had been published on the purported link between the moon and the rate of mental illness. Additionally, at least 20 studies had published the purported link between the moon and birth rates. This allowed for several in-depth reviews and analyses of the literature, which found no correlation between the moon's cycle and human biology or behavior. Clearly, much evidence has been presented to prove the moon's impact on humans from previous centuries. Not a few studies have shown that the full moon period increases violent human behavior, thereby leading to the formation of the werewolf in legends. A 4-year study concluding in 1982, published on the website of the National Institutes of Health, showed a significant increase in the crime rate during each full moon. A town officer responsible for order in the United States affirmed, "From my 19 years of experience as a police officer, it's certain that on full moon days, we seem to encounter people with strange, argumentative behavior." Now let's try to look directly at the way the moon has been and is affecting human life from ancient times to the present. First, it affects the water currents on this earth and creates what we commonly call the tides. If about 60% to 75% of the human body is water, how can we be an exception to the moon's influence? In fact, every menstruating woman has a cycle similar to the moon's cycle. This indicates that they are under the moon's influence every day. Additionally, the full moon also changes the surface tension of water. Surgeons seem to vaguely realize this when they notice that patients are more likely to bleed if operated on during the full moon. Furthermore, the moon acts as a natural light source at night to balance physical well-being and optimize emotions. Our brain needs both light and darkness. Light stimulates the production of serotonin, which helps people feel happy and motivated. Darkness helps produce melatonin, creating sleep and dreams for humans. Melatonin also stimulates the pineal gland to produce DMT, often known as a catalyst for a human awakening and subconscious evolution. When the moon is full, the illumination is significantly greater than when it is dark, and it inhibits the human brain's production of melatonin. Of course, this will lead to you finding it harder to fall asleep than usual. It even affects our happiness and emotions. Studies show that for individuals with certain sensitivities, for example, epilepsy or bipolar patients, lack of sleep will increase the rate of seizures and cause severe consequences. Although these are all too clear examples, the moon truly affects our lives more. A study also published in the less-known International Journal of Health in 2016 indicated that the moon has a huge influence on the neuroendocrine system. This study likened the moon to a brain clock, controlling human development and aging. Can the moon really affect both human cognition and physicality? If the moon is not a natural satellite, but a hollow satellite, then its influence on human life is entirely intentional. So, who is living on and controlling this artificial satellite? What is their purpose in doing so? To answer the above question, perhaps we must delve into the most distant memories of humanity, the ancient spiritual wisdom. In countless ancient spiritual texts, there is no shortage of evidence mentioning wicked reptilian-like entities that are humanoid but completely different from humans. Demons in Christianity, Nagars in Hinduism, or jinn in Islam, all described as somewhat similar to a scary human-bodied, animal-headed species, seemingly only existing in religious-themed legends. These low-frequency mystical creatures have also been described by modern authors. For example, Eckhart Tolle, a world-renowned spiritual master with famous books called Those Demons, the Human Pain Body. These entities are perhaps best explained and meticulously described in the sacred texts called the Gnostic Gospels. This book was banned around 300 BCE and replaced by others. It was not the material edited to create the Bible we know, so it gradually fell into oblivion. Legend has it that the Gnostic Gospels were stored in a cave in Nag Hammadi, Egypt, for nearly 1,000 years before they were discovered in 1945. The strange thing is that 1/5 of this manuscript is dedicated to discussing dark entities that cannot be seen with the naked eye. The Gnostic Gospels call them interdimensional beings in space. They are long-lived, even eternal beings, who specialize in luring humans to gradually lose awareness of our divine nature and self. They literally feed on the life energy from the negative emotions created by humans. According to the Gospel of Philip, vampires exist based on human ignorance, not fear of them. Ignorance is the mother of all evils. As long as humans are vague about their own divinity, the evil creatures will still exist in our bodies, like silent assassins. Those parasites will gradually devour all human life energy, hijacking and controlling the human brain. This scenario is exactly what we witnessed when the character Neo woke up. They're taking the truth pill, the Matrix movie. Why can humans be so quick-tempered and aggressive towards each other? In 1957, scientist Paul MacLean published his research on the 3 parts of the brain. He named the deepest part of our brain the amygdala. It is one of 2 almond-shaped nuclei located deep within the temporal lobe, a region intermediate with the hypothalamus and adjacent to the temporal horn of the lateral ventricle. The surprising thing here is that the structure of this area is exactly like the structure of reptiles. The amygdala controls important functions of our body, leading to the body's responses to fear, and is also the part of the brain responsible for human aggressive and violent behavior. Humans are reaching a state of balanced and efficient survival like the famous cosmologist Carl Sagan. According to him, the human brain is exactly like the brain of a crocodile. This leads to the consequence that when humans' territory is invaded, or they are challenged, we will lash out in rage. Therefore, the balance that humans achieve is extremely fragile. Sagan has warned humanity many times about the enemy that exists within each person, and politicians consider these to be acts of provoking violence and aggression, mistrust, and war. Therefore, if the reptilian-like part of the human brain is activated more, we will become more aggressive and emotional. Humans in this state will be easier to manipulate psychologically. According to the information above, we can clearly see that even without the possession of strange creatures, the human mind can still be inflamed, leading to barbaric and violent acts. Unexpected truths beyond imagination, perhaps the most effective stimulus for the brain. The truth will lead to fragments in the mind and generally drive you crazy. So, if our primitive brain is indeed being manipulated by strange interdimensional beings, why can't we see them with the naked eye? To answer this question, let's turn to the moment the moon appears. If you've ever seen a stage hypnotist, you'll see that the audience members sitting around don't see the person standing in front of them, even though the people below can see them. For it to truly be mind control, even though the hypnotized subject has consented for this to happen, if this can be effective with one or a few separate individuals, how does it affect a collective on a larger scale? Life is a basic component that constitutes the universe, and the universe always contains photons. Imagine a shaft of yellow sunlight shining through a window. According to quantum physics, this beam is made up of small light packets called photons traveling through the air. Photons, being the smallest quantum particles, are always in motion. Each living individual among us is a collection of photon particles. We can all see the same outside world, but we have different feelings about life through the senses on our bodies. The brain converts the information that humans receive from the outside into electrical information. Each brain then decodes the electrical information according to separate neural programs. Hypnotists place a block that prevents the brain from converting received information into electrical information in the brains of the hypnotized, thereby preventing their conscious brain from accessing external information. If we are living in a pre-written program, hypnotists are no different from programmers. Therefore, when photons travel into our solar system from any other places in the galaxy, their path is bent by the magnetic fields of the Sun and the Earth. However, under the effect of the Moon, the photons reflect the entire spectrum of electronic energy, even causing extremely high temperatures up to 200. David Icke believes that the Moon is like a firewall on the internet, preventing some quantum particles, photons coming from the galaxy, from reaching Earth. The Moon seems to be a barrier that causes high-frequency wavelengths to be cancelled out. Only low-frequency wavelengths reach our planet, and these wavelengths are what sustain the negative and angry state that exists in every human individual. As the Gnostic said, ignorance will cause many unpredictable consequences. It is the mother of all evils. The similar electromagnetic energy coming from the Sun is no different from a master Wi-Fi signal for the living individuals on our planet. Human senses convert received information into actual information in the brain, like how a computer displays its programs on a screen. And scientists believe that the Moon seems to have been placed in humanity's information firewall, deflecting frequencies that would expand human perception. Instead, the Moon is transmitting a frequency that makes us focus on a narrow, predetermined range of perception. Does this mean that human understanding is being limited to a certain framework? To put it simply, the way the Moon is controlling humans is no different from what many governments around the world are doing. For example, the Chinese government is filtering a large amount of information that its citizens can access online. You will not be able to search for information that is considered to affect the leadership of the Chinese Communist Party. Try searching for the World Student Crackdown at Tiananmen Square. That was one of the bloodiest incidents that occurred in the 20th century, and you are still able to read information about that event, aren't you? But the people of China are not. They will not be able to find any information about the Tiananmen event through the internet. What the Chinese people find are only happy, peaceful images of people at Tiananmen to prevent bloodshed from happening on its territory again. The Xi Jinping government is choosing to maintain absolute state control over information on the internet. Back to our story. Could the moon be a tool of some extraterrestrial force placed in Earth's orbit to control our life? It sounds crazy, but China is constantly experimenting to create an artificial moon of its own. Gravity on the moon is only about 1/6 of Earth's gravity. If you drop a rock on the moon, it will fall slower. If you weigh 68 kilograms on Earth, you'll weigh about 11 kilograms on the moon. According to the SCMP, China is building a research facility to simulate the moon's low-gravity environment to compete with the US in the space race. This facility is said to be China's artificial moon, inspired by the experiment of using magnets to levitate a frog, and is likely to be the world's first simulated lunar gravity environment. A scientist at the China University of Mining and Technology said, "The simulation system of this facility can make gravity disappear, and can even last as long as desired, not just achieving a temporary effect like when people are on an airplane. To do this, the system uses a very strong magnetic field to magnetize and create a low gravity of only 1/6 of Earth's gravity." At the center of the facility is a vacuum chamber containing a small-sized moon with a diameter of 60 centimeters. The artificial moon landscape is also made of rock and light dust to create a feeling if the experiencer is on the real moon. According to Mr. Li Sharing, the facility will play a crucial role in China's future lunar missions, including the construction of infrastructure on the moon. He said, "The system will allow scientists to test equipment and potentially prevent costly miscalculations in a simulation of the harsh lunar environment. Rock and dust foundations can behave completely differently from Earth. The low-gravity simulation equipment can also be used to check whether new technologies, like 3D printing, can be used to build structures on the moon's surface. This helps evaluate the possibility of establishing permanent human settlements, including the issue of how well the ground absorbs heat." This is considered China's next effort to take the lead in the international space race with the US. Previously, China's lunar exploration program successfully landed a probe on the far side of the moon in 2019 and brought rock samples back to Earth for the first time in 44 years in 2020. This achievement began with a humorous experiment conducted in 1997 involving the use of magnetic rings to levitate a frog in the air. Accordingly, magnetic force is exerted by an electromagnetic coil through which electric current flows. Normally, the frog is not magnetic, but when placed in the magnetic field of the electromagnet, it also becomes a weak magnet. This is a phenomenon in physics called induced diamagnetism. Accordingly, the magnetic force pushed the frog off the ground. Because scientists had previously calculated the magnetic force to balance the frog's weight, it was in a state of equilibrium and could levitate in the air. According to scientist André Geim, the diamagnetic levitation force, or magnetic force, is very weak, so we pay little attention to its existence every day. However, when the magnetic force is raised to balance gravity, it creates incredible environments. Throughout his research, Geim not only experimented with the frog, but also demonstrated with other objects. Initially, only colleagues and students came to watch the fun, and then curious visitors from everywhere also flocked to see it. In fact, Geim was not the first to discover diamagnetic levitation. In 1991, two French physicists, Eric Bunion and Robert Tournier, published the results of experiments on levitating organic materials and graphite. So, if the artificial moon experiment is successful, the night sky in China will be 10 times brighter than it is now. The ideas about the moon sound absurd, but they were strongly affirmed by the theological author Barbara Handclough. According to her, insanity and bleeding under the effect of the full moon are completely real. The moon is a very powerful electronic computer, and it has greatly restricted human programs on this planet. The energy from the moon has transmitted electronic frequencies to Earth throughout the ages. The moon is a manufactured satellite anchored outside the Earth. The atmosphere is like a monitoring intermediate device of a supercomputer. In some way, the satellite named the moon is greatly affecting the Earth in a repeated cycle. If what Barbara said is true, then it seems that the true owners of the Earth are hiding behind that moon. All human technological advancements and evolution seem to be arranged, controlled, and monitored by a satellite named the moon. Many studies indicate that the full moon not only directly affects humans, but also affects animals and plants. According to two scientists, G.I. Gurdjieff and J.J. Ouspensky, everything living on Earth, whether human, animal, or plant, is food for the moon. The moon is a giant entity that nourishes everything living and growing on Earth. Both agree that the moon is sucking the life forms of the Earth. In 2000, a scientific study on the relationship between the full moon and animals was conducted in the United Kingdom. The research report showed that the link between the full moon and the significant increase in animal bites on humans is completely real. In fact, patients seeking hospital treatment for animal bites significantly increased during the full moon period between 1997 and 1999. The study concluded that animals tend to bite people more during the full moon. In early 2014, a physicist and astronomer published a video of himself observing the moon from Earth through a telescope. If you look closely, you will see thermal energy surrounding the moon like layers of waves passing across its surface. A few months later, many scientists researched this thermal wave layer, realizing that this wave layer was continuously maintained whenever they observed the moon. Not a few scientists came to the unbelievable conclusion that the moon is actually just a three-dimensional projection in space. So, what is being hidden behind all these facts? The moon seems to be more than just a rock in space. There are many stories there. Ultimately, there is still no real evidence about the moon being publicly disclosed clearly and transparently. All events seem to be just one-sided speculation in our minds. And what do you think? Do you still believe that the moon is just a natural satellite like any other planet in the solar system? Or do you believe it is an artificial satellite that is monitoring human life? Just imagine, what if you, curled up in bed, listening to a Mystic Pillars video, are being monitored from above by some mysterious force? It's hard to imagine that the moon is monitoring us on behalf of races with superior intelligence to humans. But the fact that they are amplifying human anger and lack of control to prevent us from developing higher is what is truly unacceptable. So what is the truth? Don't forget to leave your opinions in the comments section below. According to research and assessments by the scientific community, a reality is unfolding. As you listen to this video, the moon is slowly moving further away from us every year. The moon takes some of the Earth's rotational energy and uses it to propel itself up about 4 centimeters higher in its orbit. Researchers say that when it formed about 4.6 billion years ago, the moon was about 22,530 kilometers away from Earth. But now, that distance has reached 450,000 kilometers. Meanwhile, the Earth's rotation speed is slowing down. The day we are experiencing is getting longer. The gravitational force between these two very close celestial bodies causes a phenomenon called a tidal bulge. The surface of both planets is deformed by gravity, forming a bulge directed towards the other planet. Eventually, our planet's tidal bulges will combine along an imaginary line running through the center of the Earth and the Moon. Our planet's alternating rotation will pretty much stop. Is it possible that this hollow satellite is sensing the strong development of science and technology mastered by humans and fears being discovered in the near future? All of this is difficult to answer accurately. The Moon in particular and the universe in general have been, are, and always will be a huge mystery waiting for humans to explore. Thank you all for tuning into Mystic Pillars. We look forward to seeing your thoughts and comments below. See you in the next video.